It's the fall of 1984, and actor Jon-Erik Hexum is frustrated. Despite a meteoric rise to fame from college football bench player to TV star in just 2 years, Hexum has already grown weary of the tedious grind behind the scenes on his new CBS spy show, Cover Up. Not to mention the off-screen friction with co-star Jennifer O'Neill and executive producer Glenn A. Larson. To make matters worse, critics were savaging the show, which found itself near the bottom of the ratings after only 6 episodes. Hoping to turn things around, Glenn Larson fired his writing staff on Friday, October 12th. As the cast and crew scrambled to stay on CBS's schedule, Hexum was anxious to wrap filming, to fly to Las Vegas with his girlfriend E.G. Daily to tape a guest appearance on Circus of the Stars. He would never make it there. Did a filming delay and rush production on Cover Up's 7th episode, Golden Opportunity, lead to a deadly mistake? We'll find out next on Dark Tube, TV's wicked history. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is just a quick note to say that the following video is an abridged excerpt taken from my 4-part podcast delving into Jon-Erik Hexum's life, career, and tragic death. For the whole story, including the incredible details of Hexum's generous gift of organ donation, please check out Dark Tube, TV's wicked history, wherever you get your podcasts. With Cover Up undergoing a change in creative leadership, new writer-producer Bob Shayne found himself scrambling to write new scripts without losing production days. Upon stepping into the head writer position, Shayne set his sights on the show's fast-approaching 7th episode. To make things as smooth as possible, Shayne asked Glenn Larson if he could dip into the past to maybe repurpose one of Larson's older scripts. Larson suggested The Old Diamond Game, the 3rd episode of Switch, starring Robert Wagner. Actually, it was a story premise that Larson had used a few times before in his shows Sword of Justice, Simon & Simon, and The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. If it worked 4 times before, Larson probably thought, why not 5? The Switch episode, written by Larson and Michael Sloan, has the heroes going after a con artist who bilked some innocent folks out of a bunch of money. The heroes then put a sting on, comically playing against type, until the thief inadvertently gives them back the money he stole and is arrested. On Cover Up, Mac and Dani come up with their con on the fly, bringing Dani's photo assistant Rick in on the sting. In the series, Rick is portrayed for dim-witted laughs by actor Mykelti Williamson, still a decade away from his breakout role as Bubba in Forrest Gump. So Rick now poses as a buyer for the thief's gold bars. For his part, Shayne thought the script for Golden Opportunity turned out well considering the fast turnaround. CBS didn't share his enthusiasm. When one CBS executive read Shayne's script, he gave the note back that there wasn't enough, quote, action in the story. TV had changed in the last decade, it seemed, and stories from the cerebral 70s just wouldn't cut it in the action 80s. So Shayne went back to work on the episode, keeping the general premise but adding in a through line of action scenes. They never used that word action, Shayne told a Hexum fan site in 2009. The code word is action. That meant violence. Shayne added a couple of fistfights, a car chase, and a side plot that has the big bad guy ordering Mac to prove his loyalty by killing Rick. The revised script now called for a scene set on a rocky outcrop of a Florida beach in which Mac shoots Rick. But to make it look real to the bad guy and the cops watching through binoculars, Mac uses a gun filled with blanks. Mac shoots Rick for everyone to see, dumps the body into the ocean, proves his loyalty, and the con goes on from there. The scene itself is pretty standard, if not really necessary. Remember Shayne, if that network asshole hadn't pressured me, that scene wouldn't have been in the script, and that gun wouldn't have been in Jon-Erik's hand. Filming on the revised script started on Monday, October 8th, and progressed as planned. On Thursday, October 11th, the scene where Hexum shoots Williamson was filmed without incident. Later that night, Glenn Larson called Hexum over to his house for dinner to talk about how the show was going. It's likely the two talked about the state of the show, Larson's plans to fix it, and Hexum's concerns about his lack of input. As a show of good faith, the evening ended with Larson asking Hexum to join him in Colorado for the upcoming weekend. He had to decline. See, he was scheduled to fly to Vegas that Friday night to tape his performance for Circus of the Stars. And though Larson wasn't too keen about having his star perched 50 feet above the ground, he knew Hexum well enough to know that once he committed to something, that was pretty much it. and Hexum was committed. Always athletic, Hexum had been training for his circus stunt for weeks. But as the taping date approached, he was getting worried. With cover-up's 15-hour workdays, Hexum had barely found time to practice the tightrope walk. And without the training, it was possible producers wouldn't let him perform it on the show. The next day, Friday, October 12, 1984, Hexum had lunch on set with Daly, who had felt compelled to visit the actor instead of packing for her Las Vegas trip. She later said she saw no signs that Hexum appeared depressed or despondent, but he seemed rather grouchy with the delays in filming so far that day. But after lunch, Daly returned home to pack for Las Vegas, and Hexum went to a swing set on stage 18 of the Fox lot. In this case, the swing set was that of a Florida hotel room. On the right side nightstand, the show's prop master placed a pair of pliers, a dozen or so blanks, and a few dummy rounds of ammunition. Now in Hollywood, there are two types of rounds used during filming. The first are dummy bullets. These look exactly like live rounds except without gunpowder in the casing, so they're harmless. You generally see these strung along gunfighter belts in westerns. The second are blanks. Now these are generally filled with gunpowder, which is tamped down into the casing with either cotton, plastic, paper, or wax stopper. Then the edges of the casing are crimped off to hold the stopper and the gunpowder in place. Now the amount of gunpowder in a blank can be changed depending on how much of a flash the director wants for the scene. In this case, the blanks were loaded to a 2/3 charge. That means that only 2/3 of the normal amount of gunpowder was used. Lowering the charge on the blank also alters the bang of the shot, so a lower charge often helps to protect the hearing of the cast and crew in close quarters. The scripted scene called for Hexum to sit on the edge of the bed and load blanks into the gun before guest star Dick Durock arrives to take Mac to the hit. The prop master handed Hexum the prop gun he had used the day before in the beach scene with Mykelti Williamson. But this hotel room scene did not call for Hexum's gun to be fired. So it's unclear why the blank rounds the prop master gave Hexum were loaded with gunpowder. The gun placed in Hexum's hand that day was a 1980 Smith & Wesson 44 caliber Remington Magnum 629 double-action revolver. The double action means the gun had no hammer spur, that thing that gunfighters menacingly cock with their thumbs. The lack of a hammer spur is meant to provide an extra level of safety, preventing the gun from being cocked accidentally. Clint Eastwood famously brandished a .44 Magnum in his Dirty Harry pictures, but this .44 Magnum had been specially modified by the Magnaport Company, so that the barrel had been shortened from about 7 inches to 2.5 inches. Modifying or porting a gun reduces its recoil while also allowing for a brighter muzzle flash, and both of these modifications are ideal for Hollywood productions. Actors don't have to worry about the weapon's kickback, and the directors get bright, fiery gun blasts that look especially good on screen. But modifying this .44 Magnum also perhaps made it look deceptively less dangerous than it really was, because this .44 Magnum now looked a little more like a snub-nosed .22 instead of the most powerful handgun in the world. The order of events filmed that Friday afternoon plays like this. We start with a master shot or a wide shot of Mac sitting on the edge of the bed, and Mac crimps the ends of the cartridge casings with the pliers, making his own blank rounds. Then, in a close-up, Mac carefully places the 2 crimped blanks into the revolver's cylinder. Back to the master shot. Before Mac can add a 3rd round, there's a knock at the door. So Mac stows the gun in a gym bag, covers the nightstand with a towel to hide the bullets, and gets up. The camera then awkwardly pans with Mac as he crosses the room and opens the door, revealing Ralph, the villain's main goon, again played by actor and stuntman Dick Durock. In that same master shot, Ralph tells Mac that it's time to go and kill Rick. Mac says, "No, I work alone," but Ralph says no, he's going with Mac to make sure he does it. The scene then cuts to an insert shot of Mac reaching into the gym bag, taking out the gun, opening the cylinder, spinning it, and then snapping it shut. And then back to the master shot as Ralph and Mac exit, closing the hotel door behind them. Now on screen, this scene takes 52 seconds to play out, but it was taking hours to film. Director Sidney Hares, a veteran of many Glenn Larson shows, just wasn't getting the coverage he thought he needed. The first coverage or camera angle was the wide one, the master shot. But as Hares and the film crew moved the cameras and lighting to film the next angle, there were delays. Normally on a film set, during a break in filming, and when a weapon isn't being used in a scene, the prop master takes it back from the actor for safekeeping. For one reason or another, the property master on cover-up did not do this. Some have reported that during the delay, either Hares suggested or Hexum decided that he needed to practice loading the gun so it looked good on camera. After all, Mac Harper was supposed to be a weapons expert, so that could explain why Hexum kept the gun between takes. By 5 p.m., Hexum was growing impatient with the camera's setup delay. It had already been a long day, and with a plane to catch to Las Vegas, it was looking to be a long night. According to People magazine, the exhausted actor lied down and fell asleep. When Hexum woke up 10 to 15 minutes later, ready to film the scene, he was told the new setup still wasn't ready. Referring to yet another delay, he may have said aloud for anyone to hear, "Can you believe this crap?" According to some of the 40 people on set that afternoon, Hexum then idly picked up the Prop 44 Magnum from the nightstand where he'd left it. He knew it was loaded because he'd practiced putting blank shells and dummy rounds into the cylinder. But what an overwhelming majority of the witnesses reported next is that Hexum called out, "Let's see if I've got one for me." Hexum then put the gun to within an inch of his right temple. He made a silly face. When he pulled the trigger, it was 5:15 p.m. On set, there was instant confusion. One crew member started screaming for help and ran to the soundstage next door where Fall Guy was filming. Other crew members rushed to the actor's side. Someone wrapped his head in a towel to staunch the bleeding. One of the guest actors, likely Dick Durock, put his finger in Hexum's mouth to either prevent him from swallowing his tongue or to help unclench his jaw so he could breathe. The show's hairdresser, Dino Ganziano, checked Hexum's pulse, which was thready but there. A stagehand found a prop wooden door nearby, laying it beside Hexum and pulling him onto it. The crew then carried Hexum off the set and into the parking lot, where another crew member had backed up a Fox Studios station wagon. Less than a minute after the shot, 2 Fox employees had loaded the door carrying Hexum into the back of the wagon, leaving the back hatch open for his 6'1" frame. The station wagon then raced through the studio gates with Hexum's feet resting on the back bumper. Whoever was driving made the quick decision to bring Hexum to nearby Beverly Hills Medical Center. During the mile-long drive there, Hexum lost 4 pints of blood. Once admitted to BHMC, doctors stopped the bleeding and assessed Hexum's condition. His vital signs remained strong, one hospital spokesperson told the media, which had already begun assembling in the parking lot. Given the nature of the wound, the doctors initially thought Hexum was suffering from a normal gunshot. When informed his wound was actually caused by a fired blank round, Dr. David Ditzworth and a team of neurosurgeons wheeled Hexum into surgery. During a 5-hour craniotomy, doctors discovered what had happened. When the gun was fired, there was enough gunpowder in the blank round to push the capping wad through the crimped end of the casing. So that wad of paper or cotton struck Hexum's temple with what is called flame cutting, the force of the blast from the gunpowder out of the barrel. The wad then smashed into Hexum's temple with enough force that it caused a quarter-sized piece of skull to break off and travel 6 inches into his brain. It wasn't the wadding that caused so much damage. It was his own skull fragment. That piece of bone lodged deep into Hexum's brain and caused massive hemorrhaging on the entire right side of his head. Dr. Ditzworth and the surgeons did their best to try to repair the skull fracture, but the bone fragment was too deep in his brain to be removed. As Hexum's friends gathered in the hospital waiting room, doctors stabilized him and placed him on sedatives. This essentially put him in a medically induced coma, one from which he would never awake. That night, Cover Up saw an uptick in the ratings from the morbidly curious. Meanwhile, LAPD detectives sealed Stage 18 at Fox and began their investigation, but it didn't take long. On Tuesday, October 16th, with Hexum in the ICU on life support, Greta and Gunnar Hexum knew Jon-Erik's prognosis was not good. As they began discussing what to do next, so were the executives at CBS. The day of the incident, Friday, Cover Up had 2 episodes in the can, as in they were ready to air. That gave the network 2 weeks until they were forced to air repeats until new episodes could be filmed. Determined not to cancel the show and scuttle CBS's investment in it, producers, including Glenn Larson, decided to get back to work. On Monday morning, just 36 hours after the incident, Cover Up returned to Stage 18 to finish filming Golden Opportunity. According to Brian O'Dowd, the set was eerily quiet. People were silent, he wrote in 1985, and some were in tears. Somehow, O'Neill and the rest of the cast and crew made it through 3 additional days of filming, but Shayne scrambled to rewrite the end of the script. For scenes that were supposed to feature Hexum, producers used a body double and some creative editing. A planned ending was scrapped, and producers used a previously filmed shot of Hexum in a phone booth as Mac makes a call to Dani to wrap up the story. A voice impersonator was used for his dialogue in that scene. Golden Opportunity eventually aired Saturday, November 3rd, and its higher ratings reflected that many columnists reminded viewers it would be Hexum's last. Ironically, the episode came out rather well, said Bob Shayne later, except, of course, it had a complete pall over it. On Wednesday, October 17th, CBS announced that the show would go on a brief hiatus while the network and producers figured out what to do next. CBS President Bud Grant told the media that no official decisions had been made except, quote, "Our intention is to keep the show going with minimal interruption. We plan to keep the series in its current time slot," unquote. He neglected to add that auditions for Hexum's replacement had already begun. By Thursday, October 18th, doctors stopped giving Hexum medication and sedatives. This was because they needed his body drug-free when they performed an electroencephalogram. This EEG would tell doctors what kind of brain activity Hexum had, if any. Under California law, the moment of death occurs only when 2 doctors independently declare there is no further brain function. The doctors made that declaration at 7:31 p.m. Hexum was 18 days shy of his 27th birthday. It was decided early on not to recast the role of Mac Harper with another actor. Initially, Larson felt he could have the show return to the air by November 17th, but despite a discreet casting call to agents for a hunky Hexum type, he was having trouble finding someone to fill his shoes. The man Glenn Larson really wanted was Australian farm boy turned dancer turned model turned actor Anthony Hamilton. But Hamilton, at first at least, wanted no part of this show. "I didn't think it was right or ethical, because I knew Jon-Erik," he told one interviewer. Larson and Hamilton talked long into the night about Hexum and about joining Cover Up to replace him. The next day, Hamilton flew to LA for a screen test with O'Neill. By day's end, it was announced that Anthony Hamilton would step into Cover Up in the newly created role of Jack Stryker, starting immediately. On November 17th, Jennifer O'Neill checked herself into Cedars-Sinai Hospital for exhaustion after she fainted on the set of Cover Up. Since Hexum's accident, she had lost 10 pounds. Once Tony Hamilton joined the cast, production had ramped up to 7 days a week in order to keep up with the network's schedule. The first day back to filming, however, was fraught with tension. The script called for a stuntman to fire a gun in a scene. Everyone on set knew the irony, but they also knew it was part of the job. That pistol shot on the first day of resumption of filming was a psychological hurdle that we all had to get over, Hamilton told TV Guide at the time. For Hamilton's introductory episode entitled Writer's Block, producers refilmed his intro to match Hexum's almost shot for shot. In the first 5 minutes of the episode, Jack Stryker is introduced a la James Bond as he comes out of the ocean in the south of France. With Mac, quote, "on another assignment," unquote, Stryker joins Dani in a potboiler plot to bring a former spy in from the cold. Then, after a successful mission, Stryker explains to Dani that Mac Harper, quote, "isn't coming back." That was the only explanation given for his character's exit. As the credits rolled, however, Richard Anderson's voiceover intoned, "When a star dies, its light continues to shine across the universe for millenniums." Jon-Erik Hexum died in October this year, but the lives he touched will continue to be brightened by his light forever and ever. The touching tribute was marred only by the fact that producers spelled Hexum's first name wrong on the screen. Writer's Block, which aired November 24th, ranked 61st out of 66 shows for the week. As Cover Up continued into the spring of '85, it saw not only a slight uptick in ratings, but in quality as well. Critics said one of the reasons for the resurgence was the chemistry between Hamilton and O'Neill. That new chemistry, no doubt, benefited from Hamilton and O'Neill's off-screen friendship, something she'd never really had with Hexum. But that chemistry was also purely for show. There was a flurry about Tony's sexual persuasion, wrote O'Neill. What followed was a big hush-hush campaign by the producers about the rumors he was gay. Hamilton passed away from AIDS in 1995. Cover Up was canceled after one season. On December 2, 1984, Circus of the Stars aired on CBS without Jon-Erik Hexum. Producer Bob Stivers admitted they'd taped footage of Hexum rehearsing his high-wire act, but opted against using it after his death. When we got the phone call, Stivers told the LA Times, we gave the rehearsal footage to his mother. On July 22, 1985, Greta and Gunnar Hexum launched a $1 million wrongful death lawsuit against Fox Television, Glenn Larson Productions, and director Sidney Ayers. They allege those parties were negligent because they had not properly trained Jon-Erik on how to use weapons for the show. They also alleged Cover-Up's prop department gave Hexum a gun that was unsafe and dangerous, and that the gun's blanks were, quote, defective and unsafe, unquote. Fox responded in 1986, countering that Hexum's own carelessness and recklessness caused his death. They asserted that he knew the risks of the firearm when he aimed the gun at his head at close range. The lawsuit was later settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. Aside from the police, the coroner, and Fox Studios' own internal investigation, the Screen Actors Guild also delved into the shooting as it related to the safety of its members. ABC had already begun to print weapon warnings on its daily call sheets, but with the number of guns used on film sets, SAG was determined to find out more. Shockingly, its committee found that injuries from blanks was a not uncommon problem. In fact, there had been at least 2 previous incidents on Cover-Up in which the wadding of blanks caused minor injuries to crew members. On-set gun safety would be brought to the fore again in 1993 with the death of Brandon Lee, and again in 2021 with the death of Helena Hutchins. The LAPD, however, was satisfied with its own investigation and closed the book on Hexum's death. Said Lieutenant Carpenter, "It was actually a case of careless handling of a firearm, and as a result, he accidentally shot himself with this blank cartridge. We are satisfied he had no knowledge of the dangers of this blank cartridge, or he wouldn't have fired it." LAPD detectives were also quick to dismiss any accounts of Russian roulette, but it didn't stop the tabloids from speculating about some kind of veiled suicide attempt that was maybe covered up by the studio to avoid a scandal. In the shooting aftermath, reports also began to crop up that Hexum had some kind of fascination with guns. "It's just not fair," E.G. Daily told Knight Ridder 2 weeks after the accident. "Now people will remember him as this crazy guy. Nobody knows anything about it. He wasn't loony or anything like that. He was just tired. And when you're tired, you don't function well, you know?" The reality is that at the time of his death, Jon-Erik Hexum was incredibly tired, and he was frustrated over the state of Cover-Up. Those frustrations were both broad, as in his lack of promised input, and narrow, as in the filming delays on October 12th that threatened his flight to yet another job in Las Vegas that night. But the one thing that Hexum was not was depressed. According to virtually everyone who spoke about him after his death, Hexum was a fun-loving, gregarious, kind-hearted, big kid at heart. Not to say those kinds of people don't get depressed, but no one who knew him ever reported seeing him in a down moment. On October 12th, 1984, while trying to lighten the mood of his co-workers, Jon-Erik Hexum, whose friends called him Jack, picked up a prop gun, perhaps unaware of its danger, and accidentally killed himself, and in the process brought to an end a promising career and a Hollywood dream, and closing just one of the many chapters in television's wicked history.